Um, Hello, comic fans. Here's Earl Grey, and that guy over there, he's Forgerelli, the mighty Forgerelli, long-time follower of my channel. And now I really needed some help there because we both read this book here, and my favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. And we both were a bit bewitched, enchanted by the art, but a bit confused as well, to put it mildly. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very fine. Fantastic. But a bit confused, as I said it. Yeah. I don't know if it's possible. It's not possible to summarize up the plot of Volume 1 and 2, maybe. But would you try for me? Because it's very difficult.
Okay. Well, Volume 1, this right
Yeah.
here. This
Yeah.
is Anka Silverberg. She's not the main character. This is Karen Reyes. She's the main character. And in book 1, we're introduced to her. She lives with her mother and her brother Dees. And she's an artist. She writes everything and draws everything in a notebook. And that's what these books are supposed to be. Or they're supposed to be Karen Reyes's notebooks, with the art and everything in there being done by Karen. And the story is what happens. Spoilers for book 1. Anka Silverberg here gets killed, shot in the heart, and Karen Reyes is determined to find out what happened. And throughout the book, we're introduced to new characters. We're introduced to Anka Silverberg's husband. We're going back in time with Anka Silverberg. Karen Reyes listens to cassette tape history of Anka growing up in Germany and being thrown into the Holocaust and concentration camps, and having to go through child prostitution she was thrown into. And then the book, we find out some more things about Karen Reyes' family's history. Karen Reyes' mother dies. And we're left at the end of book 1 where we are introduced to her brother Dees's twin brother, Victor, who apparently died in some way, and we're kind of led to believe that it was Dees's fault. And that's where book 2 is supposed to start.
Yeah. And by the way, we spoil the heck out of Volume 2. Is it even possible to summarize Volume 2? Probably.
Well, I can say that the art in Volume 2 is every bit as good as Volume 1, for sure. And the art is masterful. Her art is, when I got book 1, when it first came out, I'd never seen anything like it. And I haven't really seen anything like it since. The person who comes closest to her, I would say, is maybe Crumb's sketchbook. And say whatever you want about Crumb, he's a master artist, and she's right there with Crumb. But the story in book 2, no.
Just a little tangent there, because you have the most complete collection of Crumb that I know of, and that includes the guy who does these canonically Crumb videos. But I think you even have more. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Crumb's 4 different versions of Crumb's sketchbooks. Every limited edition Crumb hardcover that exists except for 2. One of those, there's 100 copies, and there's another one that were 5 copies, and it came out in 1968, and I've never seen it. So I have everything else except for those 2 for Crumb. So I'm a fan of Crumb. People who hate Crumb, I don't care. I love them. So.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, let's start with the art, and we picked our 5 favorite pages in Volume 2.
Okay, this is a funny one. it's not just the art is great, but it's the reason I like it is more because I know or knew people like this. Where Karen Reyes goes to stay with her upstairs neighbor for a
Yeah.
couple of days, and her apartment is filled with these porcelain clowns, these creepy, weird clowns. And I love that page because I knew my good friend of 1 mile. I used to bike 1 mile down the street to my friend Justin Zarnata's house, and his mother, Norma, had these porcelain clowns all over on tables, and she had carousel horses, and we couldn't touch them. We couldn't go within 5 feet of them. And it was weird when I was a kid, and it's still weird now. And to see that, I haven't seen anything like it since I was a kid, and seeing that in the book was neat to see. And the clowns are drawn beautifully. They're just very weird.
I was so close to choose this page, the double spread with the room, as my pick number, whatever, because we had neighbors, and when my brother and I were children, we sometimes go over there into their room, into their apartment, and and I was a bit. It was lots of kitsch stuff like that, and clowns and dolls and all these kind of stuff, and I've remembered them because of the page here, as you did with the
I
mother.
haven't seen clowns like that since I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah, same.
I laughed out loud when I saw them.
Yeah, it's funny. My pick number 5 is this one here. Not because it's the most beautiful page of them all. This here, but because there's Sharon in Hades, or Charon in Hades picture here of this horror magazine is fully integrated in the story, because they go, Karen and her friends, they go down into the basement pretty close to the end of volume 2. Finally, they investigate there, and it's pretty exciting, and you think, now we come to the solution and the conclusion that we are promised. But more about that later. It's not by far not the best horror cover that Emil Ferris drew as Karen Reyes, but I found it pretty neat that she chose this cover here.
Okay.
Now it's your turn with pick number 4.
Okay, I don't really. I know what my number 1 is, but the other ones I didn't really pick in any order. But this was a page, especially after getting to the end of the book, that I went back to look for, and it shows what may be the truest monster in the whole book.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that we've seen him angry in the book before, but in this picture, he looks like a monster. And when you go through the rest of the book, this might be other than the Nazis, this might be the truest monster in real life.
Yeah.
In the book. I mean, it might, I'm not sure, but it might be the reason for the very title of the book.
Yeah. Well, it's possible. That's an interesting interpretation. My pick 4 is, again, not a page that wowed me from an artistic point of view, but I think it is a pretty important page for me to accept that Karen Reyes drew all the stuff here. To believe that all these drawings were made by a girl at the age of 10 years. And here I can believe it, because here's a bit scratchy pre-drawing, and there she is 3 times. And where the whole thing, her thinking about the word understanding, which means that you have to stand under things, is a pretty, yeah, maybe a good way to see or to feel how kids sometimes explore language and discover the meaning of words. So yeah, I found it nice to see her actually doing all the stuff that we could marvel at on each page.
Yeah, similar. I remember from your review of book 1, the self-esteem, and she thought that the steam part of esteem was steam like from a kettle. So
yeah, and there was another part which made me laugh out loud in volume 1, which I reread as you did, about the German painters. And as a German, you don't think twice about the name of Otto Dix. Yeah. It's just the name, Otto Dix. But
for my number 3, I mean, the artwork is beautiful, but in volume 2, I think Jeffrey the Brain Alvarez. Here's him here.
Yeah.
Here's him as a monster, the Brain. But in the book, in book 2, he was an interesting character in book 1, you know, just weird and odd. But in book 2, I think he becomes the most likable character in the whole book. There's some other smaller characters that are pretty likable, but the lengths that he goes to when at one point Karen goes to him to talk about confusion about her brother, he handles it as well as another brother to her. He's very, you know, sensitive and careful with her. And even when a scene where her true brother Dees is scaring her, and Dees doesn't realize that she's listening to Dees and the Jeffrey the Brain talk, he doesn't realize Karen's there, but Jeffrey the Brain realizes she's there and goes to comfort her rather than Dees comforting her. And as the book plays out and you find out more about these characters, Jeffrey the Brain Alvarez is my personal favorite, most likable character in the book. And he is there, and as a brain monster. And as I read the book, I liked him more and more and more, and he was my favorite.
Okay, I jumped now to my rank number 2, because my rank number 2 would be this picture here.
Oh, great.
And this time really for art reasons, because I really love his hairdo, the afro there, and all the lines there. That I could really, you can get lost. It's almost op art. So yeah, now I skip to my rank number 2. I just do my rank number 3 there. That's the cover of the Mothman.
Yeah, I almost picked that one myself.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, what a design here. And maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything like this guy nowhere in horror comics or other comic art. The only problem here is that we see this cover pages before it actually occurs in the story, because this cover here is supposedly drawn by her brother, or is drawn by her brother, and we see here a smaller version, and there he shows her this drawing.
I'm not a big monster person, but you know, just reading comics, you hear about him. I've heard of the Mothman before, and I believe he's what's called a cryptid, like a, you know, like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster, one of these, you know, make believe. But
Slender Man was
from and I believe it's from New Jersey. There's supposed to be a Mothman, and there was also a New Jersey Devil, but these are more like local, more obscure ones. But that's where I've heard of Mothman. Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little bit for my second one, because rereading book one, it was something that I did not notice that while rereading it that I absolutely loved, and I'll just point it out quickly. But you see on this page here, you see her mother is scolding these two creepy guys here. And it says that in the text here, it says that Dee says when Mama and you are fighting, you don't realize it, but slowly but surely she gets bigger than you. And, you know, he means this metaphorically. And I didn't notice this, but if you go to, it's 3 or 4 pages later, you actually see that she starts out smaller than him, and then slowly but surely she becomes a giant to him. And that was just something that I saw that I thought was pretty neat. But the thing that I definitely wanted to show is my second favorite page in book 2. It relates directly to book 1, and you can't really, you have to show a page in book 1 to understand it. And that's this character Franklin. And these are scars on his face, and they're very strange scars. And Karen describes these scars as having a light behind them that kind of shines through on him. And maybe the only thing that's resolved in book 2 is finding out where Franklin, her friend, got these scars. And that is in book 2. And it's a page where some of the art, where right here, this is outstanding, this coin. But if you're reading the story and you see this page here, this is the scene where Franklin got his scars. And I don't know if Emil Ferris did this intentionally or if there was any meaning behind this, but this scene and what happened to Franklin reminded me of the story of Emmett Till, which is something that happened in America in the 60s or 50s. And it was, people know that it was a little boy, a 13-year-old boy was murdered for whistling at a white woman. And what happened to him, people know that he was killed, but I'm not going to get into the details, but if you read up on the details of what happened to him, it was horrific. One of the most horrific things that I've ever heard about being done to another person. And it kind of, that scene reminded me very much of what happened to Emmett Till. And after rereading book 1 and seeing the scars, you know, highlighted like that, and you can see this is what those men did to him as a boy. That's pretty similar to what happened to Emmett Till, and that's it really stuck with me, because the Emmett Till story, what happened to him, is something that profoundly affected me.
Yeah, you showed her brother Dees as a villain, as a devil, and I think actually a bit different about him. I think that the whole family thing with the mother and the brother and Karen, is they are actually so close to each other and tender and caring about each other, that I really buy this idea that he has to do what he does because he wants to protect his sister. But my pick number 1 would be this almost a bit kitschy picture of him and young Karen, now really young Karen, because of Jeffrey. He said to Karen that she has to see the good things in her brother and remember the good things, and that's portrayed in the silent page here. yeah, almost a bit too kitschy, but sometimes it gets stuff like this gets me, and it's a beautiful drawing as well. My picture number one. So I'm very much on Dee's side on things, and I don't
I
think
almost
that.
picked that one too, but
Yeah.
I decided like after the story was over, I'm not sure what the monster is, and I thought maybe it could.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll show my number one here. And first, there needs to be a preface to it, and this is the preface page here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Anka Silverberg as a young woman here, and she's walking through a concentration camp, and she's walking, and she hears this sound, and it's a buzzing, and she thinks that it sounds like a nest of giant wasps. And the very next page, you turn it, and this is the centerfold. And if you don't know what happened in the Holocaust, if you don't know the history of it, you probably wouldn't know what this is. You'd be confused by it. But if you look at it, this is the hair of the women that were in the concentration camp, and their heads were being shaved before they were executed in the gas chamber. And I saw this page when I flipped the book to this page. I stared at it for a good 2 minutes, because you see all the different colors of hair and the types of hair, and she really drew it to show you how many different heads of hair are here, and it's like it's a personal thing where sometimes, like, it's the girl with the red dress in Schindler's List, you need to have a human face or something more human. People look at the victims of the Holocaust with their shaved heads, and they look like walking skeletons, and it's sometimes it can be hard to relate to that. And seeing all this hair here, you realize that these are all just women and young girls and old ladies, and they were all treated equally, and they were all murdered. And they literally treated them like cattle, where they you use every part of the cow that you can, and they use the hair for munitions or whatever else they needed. But that's what was worth something to the Nazis, not the people, but their hair. And that it's something that people need to remember that, and that this page just hits you. If you know what it is, it's a wow page. And
absolutely.
It might be my favorite page in both books. I wish there was more about what happened to that storyline, but that's something that page will stick with me forever.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad and still incredibly beautiful how she drew it. When you open it up and you see just these 2 pages, you think, oh, beautiful. And then when you realize, as you said it, about what it's all about, then this second layer comes to the picture, which makes it really a piece of art, disturbing art, confusing art.
And it's something I don't think you can see something like that in real life, where I know that some of the museums will have piles of glasses and piles of shoes and luggage. And
I've been into some of these concentration camps, and it's so I'm almost tearing up just because of that. A good reason to edit this out, but it's really that's not fun. That's very sad. It's very important that we keep these places and that people see this here, especially in our world when people start to believe that there wasn't anything like the Holocaust or something like that. And
denying that is as evil as what happened.
But back to our monster here at hand. What we make out of the whole book story-wise, because we were promised a conclusion.
Yeah.
with the second book.
One thing I would actually, as far as my point about Dee's being a monster, what made me think that part of the monster, this, was the very last page of the book. I don't know if it means anything because it was never explained. So we won't know, at least for a long time. But the second to last page, because the last page is static, but
Yeah.
here's the last page, and you see Karen and Dee's holding hands, and Dee's hand looks blue to me. And the other character, one of the main character who you see is blue all the time is Anka. And part of that is because she was a very sad person, but part of that was also because she was dead. So I don't know if his hand being blue and Karen's being brown, like she's got the fur of a werewolf, I don't know what it means. And it's not explained. So it's one of the a dozen story threads that is not answered at all in book 2. I mean, for me, when I was going through reading book 1, one of the things I wanted to do, like to refresh my memory, is I remember stories about Gary Groth at Fantagraphics when they found My Favorite Thing is Monsters. They got this manuscript in, and they're like, "What is this?" They thought for sure this is who did this. It has to be somebody that they know of, because they didn't think there was any way this person who's never done a graphic novel before produces this masterpiece as their first ever graphic novel. And I wanted to see, some of the stories about that. And part of the research came up. I found some stories about why the book was delayed for 7-8 years. I didn't know this stuff until last week when I read through the book. And apparently all of the delays were because of Emil Ferris. She said right before book 2 was supposed to come out, 6 months or 7 months after book 1, back in 2016, 2017. But Emil Ferris wanted to polish up some of the artwork in book 2, and Fantagraphics let her. No problem. And they pushed the date back again and again and again. And all of this was because of Emil Ferris. She said she was sick. She said that she didn't have the time. She didn't have any money. Just, general excuses that you're going to hear from artists. And then in 2021, Fantagraphics got a cease and desist letter from Emil Ferris's attorneys saying that they didn't have a right to publish book 2, or a sequel to book 1, but it was never supposed to be a sequel. The book was originally given to Fantagraphics as a 600-page manuscript, and they decided to split it in 2. And it was 400 pages for book 1, and for book 2, she was going to produce more pages to make the transition from book 1 to book 2 by splitting it up, the transition easier to read, add some pages, art, pinups, or things like that. But then she said that it wasn't, and it's very confusing. But this was in 2021, 4 years after book 2 was supposed to be published. And Fantagraphics was blindsided by this. She had never mentioned anything like this before. And it's weird. And it got weird. And there were accusations against Fantagraphics that they weren't paying her, or paying her correctly. But if you read into the court documents, which I don't want to get into the whole thing, but she had payment arrangements that she demanded Fantagraphics set up for her, and they followed those payment arrangements. And after the court cases went through, all those charges that Fantagraphics wasn't paying her correctly were dropped. But Fantagraphics, for apparently the first time in their 40-plus year history, had to sue, or in this case, counter-sue one of their artists. Never before. I mean, they had hundreds and maybe thousands of artists that they've worked with, and they've never had a lawsuit against one of their artists, according to the papers I read. until this. And more than that, there were things said by Emil Ferris online that she felt cheated by Fantagraphics. And reading this stuff, I didn't read into it until after I finished book 2. And at first, I don't really care about this stuff, lawsuit, money, whatever. You know, artists being late at, you know, that happens. But after reading book 2 and kind of feeling like there was no ending, that all of the major plot threads and questions brought up in book 2, who killed Anka, what happened to Victor, who was Deeze's, I guess, twin brother. He died. We're not sure how he died. Deeze says it was an accident, but the ghost of Victor says that Deeze put a gun to his head. That's never answered. There is a story, or there's a point where Victor says he put a gun to my head.
Yeah.
And took my life away from me. So I wanted to take the most important thing from him. And that's never answered. And then it's introduced in the story that Karen and Deeze's father, he was a cop apparently, and there's this bizarre sequence at the very end where Karen, major spoiler here, Karen wakes up bleeding from the head in an alley. Before that, she goes into some kind of delirium. She says, "Where is Deeze's gun?" And then the next page, or the 2 pages later, you're looking at Karen bleeding from the head, unconscious in an alley. And that's never explained. What happened? It's put in there. It's not explained what she was going to do, and it wasn't explained afterwards. Basically, I don't know, 10 pages later, Deeze brings Karen to this, back street doctor to get her head stitched up, and that's it. The book ends.
Yeah.
And they literally go on Route 66, driving off into the sunset in this red car that you had never seen or heard. It was never mentioned in the book, book 1 or book 2, and that's how the story ends. And I mean, I was at the end of book 2, after book 1, where I thought it was a masterpiece. If she never did book 2, it stood as a masterpiece. But after reading book 2, I felt like she didn't answer anything, that she made the ending strange on purpose. I get the impression that she said, "I'm going to confuse the readers on purpose." And I hate to say this, but I think it's a possibility that she did that on purpose because she was mad at the situation with Fantagraphics. And I got that opinion from reading book 2, saying to myself, what is this? And then wanting to research, thinking maybe I would find something more about her intentions or about the story by reading about this lengthy, 4-year-long or 3-year-long lawsuit. And after reading the details on that, I came out with the opinion that it maybe it's not 100%, but there's a very good possibility that she ruined her book on purpose. The art is just as good, but the story it's a mess. There's no ending to, you don't find out the what happened about anything or any of the characters, and it's disappointing. I'm let down by it and a little angry.
Yeah, even though I almost like the idea of an artist making his artwork confusing out of anger to show to just as some kind of statement, but I don't believe that it's the case. I really think that she just wanted too much and was a bit and has still in mind to really do the conclusion in a 3rd volume, as you put it out with Pantheon or whatever publisher.
That was another thing that led me to my conclusion that, I mean, she was really angry at Fantagraphics. I mean, I looked up, there was a part of the story, one of the stories I was reading about the lawsuit said that there was a bidding war or something like that for what is supposed to be a prequel to the first Monsters book, and Pantheon purchased it. And reading some of the comments when they made that announcement were people saying, well, it's good that she's finally getting with a publisher that appreciates her. And I mean, I don't know the business side of it really, but I mean, Fantagraphics pushed My Favorite Thing Is Monsters as heavily as any book I've ever seen when it first came out. So I don't know where that came from, but I get a sense of anger from her or her side towards Fantagraphics. And
on the other side, Fantagraphics and especially Gary Groth are almost infamous for their lawsuits. Maybe not against their own artists, but against anybody else, because he really has a long list of lawsuits against whom I didn't follow.
Most of those lawsuits are against him because he said stupid stuff.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I hear you about almost everything in terms of that this book here really is a mess, story-wise. But on the other hand, the love for My Favorite Thing Is Monsters that I got in volume 1, and now I waited 7 years for volume 2, and I really wanted to be this thing here, the impeccable masterpiece as it was with volume 1. So I read it really through the book, and the pages got fewer and fewer, and I thought, hey, where's my conclusion? I wanted to know who Anka murdered and so on. But I still thought, hey, I believe in Emil Ferris. Somehow all the stuff will be resolved, but then it won't. And then I thought, okay, to her defense, maybe it is just supposed to be the loose sketchbook, this fragmented storytelling that you get a shot here and a shot there, broken pieces all over, that doesn't always fit together. It's just these are the annotations of a 10-year-old girl. So, but at the latest, when you, there's so much to say. I think one of the things is that she just puts too much content, too much statements on the small shoulders of a 10-year-old child, if she's 10-year-old. But there are statements for feminism in this book here, statements for anti-racism, all good things, no doubt about it. But a 10-year-old child, which is she's pretty normal, and pretty normal child, aside of being a fantastic draughtsman, if we believe that. But otherwise, she's sometimes a bit naive, innocent. But then there are parts in the story in which she is so intelligent, clever, far beyond her years, and that's not just not plausible. It doesn't work. And on top of that, she meets this girl Shelley here, and obviously the love of her life at 10 years old, at the age of 10 years, doesn't fit in. But the biggest problem I really have with the ending, when she walks with her brother Dees into the sunset, and then I have to read this. We say goodbye to all our old friends, and then we'll leap onto Route 66. And she says, but what about my friends in Uptown? I can't leave them. And he, Care, at this point, we don't have a choice. And she says, yeah, I know. They're after us. And then she leaves. And that's so out of character for her to leave Shelley behind, if we really believe that she is so in love with her, that she's so important to her, she won't leave with her brother, and she doesn't even mention her anymore. And that's just one of these giant loopholes in the story. And as you mentioned, a lot of the stuff is just teased, like this ventriloquist, the guy who speaks with his belly, and the doll. A lot of mysteries that are lying just unsolved threads there.
Yeah. I mean, not as, just real quick, because you said this scene where they're leaving is literally, it's the second to last page in the book. And if you see the lion, they're outside of the Art Institute in Chicago. They had just left the doctor's office where he stitched her up, and they were outside the Art Institute where all those paintings were from volume 1. But one of the things that with these, where it felt strange and it felt wrong for the story with her relationship with Shelley, is that in book 1, it said straight up that she's 10 years old. Karen Reyes is 10. So she was portrayed as a very innocent, but in the frame of the story that was created, she's a masterful artist. You know, that's the part that you have to, you know, suspend, you know, your beliefs that for that. But in book 2, she's acting like she's not 10 anymore. Her relationship with Shelley is the kind of relationship you'd expect from somebody who's 5 or 6 years older. And it's just, it feels completely out of place for the story. I could understand, you know, you can say, oh, yes, she's coming at 10 years old. She's coming out of her childhood and she finds herself liking girls more than boys. But the relationship she has with Shelley is the kind of relationship a 15 or 16-year-old would have, not a 10-year-old. Not that I know of any 10-year-olds that would have like a serious relationship like that. And it's with the ending where she's walking away from that, it feels like she was introduced and then we're just throwing that story away. And that's the feeling that I got from book 2, is that in book 1, the main stories that you were following was what happened to Anka Silverberg. And by following that story, we're introduced to the story of what happened to Anka Silverberg when she was in Nazi Germany and in the concentration camps. And those were the 2 main stories that you kind of go into, and then you would come back from and go into Karen's life with her mother and her brother. Those 2 main stories are abandoned completely in the middle of book 2, and there's no conclusion or even hint of a conclusion to either one of those. And I don't necessarily have to have, you can have a good story without having an ending, but it felt like several points in this book, like where's one, here's one that I was just, this is one that absolutely, this, after I read it, it angered me.
Oh, wait.
See, this page here, and this is a monster rendition of this woman. And this woman is Karen Reyes's new art teacher. And she asks Karen here, she's introduced on this page, and then she asks Karen, can I borrow some of your artwork for a few weeks? And this is, this is about halfway into the book. So you get this idea that, oh, something's going to happen with Karen's artwork, like her teacher's going to enter into a contest or send it to a magazine or something. That is never mentioned again in the book. The teacher, the artwork, nothing. It was introduced for no. I'm not an editor. If I was an editor, I'd say, why would you put that in the book? There's no reason for that, unless you're going to address it later. And there's, on top of that, there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 different places where Karen literally says, I'll tell you about that later. Yeah. And that's going back to my idea that I get a feeling that Emil Ferris might have sabotaged the story on purpose. because one of the things I found out was the original manuscript was 620 pages. 400 pages were used for the first book, and there were 220 pages from the original manuscript. The book was supposedly done, and 220 pages were going to be used for book 2. But at some point after the lawsuit started, Emil Ferris said, oh, no, only 50 of those pages that we have out of the 220 can be used for book 2. And I have to completely change the ending. And that's what is sticking into my head is, did she use those 180 missing pages, or were those thrown out of the book to be used for something else? And that my question is for me is this what book 2 was supposed to be? And I'm not sure. That's if it's the real book 2, or if the real book 2 has not been published yet, will be published, or was just thrown out. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess if she really wants to finish all the open threads, she would at least need a 3rd volume of that thickness. So if it's Fantagraphics or not, I mean, a prequel, I don't know really how she wants to do a prequel for the story, but she has to change her ways and simplify things and cut down things to come to some kind of conclusion. I could live like you with the ambiguity if there weren't all these contradictions. The biggest one, I guess, really is with this ending, and Shelley is just treated as she wasn't even there, and I'm actually not even sure if I would want to read a volume 3, to be honest with you, because I've lost my belief in her storytelling abilities a bit. That's Karen feels now like really soon in the story, actually, it felt that she became a vehicle, an empty vessel for all the ideas and opinions of Emil Ferris. She's not the girl anymore. She's just, she's a vessel for all her comments on the world. And she's an adult woman with many, many, many ideas and many, many thoughts and opinions. And that's a problem. You can't do that.
Not with a 10-year-old,
no. No.
Franklin, the character he is talked about in the first book as a gay character, but now in book 2 he's a trans character, and he's dressing as a woman, and I'm like, okay, I'm fine with trans, but I'm guessing that he's supposed to be Karen's classmate, so he's supposed to be 10.
Yeah.
And I think that I have books that are written by trans people, about trans people, all that kind of stuff. I'm not an anti-trans person at all, but it felt forced onto these characters that in book 1 they were innocent children, and it's almost like Emil Ferris should have put at the beginning of the book 5 years later.
Yeah.
Then Shelley would have made more sense. Franklin saying, this is who I am. I know who I am now, and I want to be, a woman, or dress like a woman, or whatever it is that he's doing. At 15, 16, you grow a lot between 10 and 15, but 10-year-olds or even 11 or 12-year-olds aren't going to be as advanced as Karen is in the story with her relationship. It just it feels forced. Like you said, it feels like she's an empty vessel or an avatar for what Emil Ferris wants to say about politics or identity and all that kind of stuff. And if that, I'm perfectly fine with all that stuff, and I'd be perfectly fine with the way book 2 is if book 1 was like that. But it's a complete departure. Book 1, the story was tight. There was mystery to it, but it was a continuous plot thread, and things were revealed, and you were waiting for book 2 to find out the answers to the questions that book 1 brought up.
Yeah.
I didn't get an answer other than how Franklin got those crazy scars. I didn't get an answer to any of the questions. I mean, Anka Silverberg, I don't even know, is she mentioned in the second half of the book at all? I'm just flipping here, and I see the second half of book 2 is Karen and her relationship with Shelley and her brother. I mean, just flipping through, it's less than halfway through the book is the last time that I see Anka Silverberg mentioned, or a big chunk of story about Anka Silverberg. And that was the main basis of book 1, and it's gone from book 2, halfway through book 2.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah,
I would say for me, if I had gotten book 2 and never read book 1, book 2 I would say would be a 5 out of 5 book. The artwork is just, even if as just a sketchbook, it's that good. But book 1 is off the charts. Book 1 is for me. I mean, you had an old video where you were talking about the house is burning down, and you could grab 6 books, or you could read 6 books in the last 2 days that you were alive. For me, my favorite thing is Monsters book 1 was like in the top 2. It's all time. You know, if my deathbed I could only read 1 book, I might pick book 1 of my favorite thing is Monsters. Book 2, I would maybe flip through the art, but it didn't have the heart of book 1 to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The best thing of this whole adventure, reading the both books, was really to reread volume 1 again. And I really don't know if maybe I even sell this book here, to be honest.
Wow.
Because actually volume 1 was so perfect, and even I like the art in volume 2, but I have lots and lots of art books, pure art books, and I'm not so sure if I really need this book here. But that's very harsh here. Right? Overall, you should read this book, come to your own opinions and conclusions, and maybe you have an idea about a conclusion, and maybe you can tell us who was the murderer of Anka Silverberg. Do you have anything else to say that you want to say about my favorite thing is Monsters?
I have the free comic book day, just because it has a few new pages about how she was paralyzed by the West Nile virus, and here's her first drawing that she did after she was paralyzed. And she had to take a duct tape and tape a quill pen to her hand to draw, and that's a hell of a drawing with a pen taped into your hand. And I have a couple other books that just have a few pages of art from her, and I'll buy anything that she does. And I'm hoping that there's more, and I'm hoping that there's more to Karen Reyes and Anka Silverberg's story that we find out at some point. I'm really hoping that.
You have put out punk photos from punk concerts on Instagram and your collection.
Yeah, I have starting in 2010, when I got back into seriously collecting this stuff here. I took pictures of my entire collection, and then I started, when I was ordering things, when I would get mail, I would stack the books up on a chair, and I would take pictures of it. And I have, I don't know, more 1,500 pictures of comic book hauls, of trade paperbacks and hardcovers and things. And I've been slowly but surely putting them all up on Instagram, which is at Forgerelli. I'm also on Twitter, but I don't post the comic stuff on there. And I post other photography of, flowers and birds and things like that I see. But I also, I was heavily into photography of hardcore punk bands from the 90s onward. And I'm not an artist, I'm strictly an amateur, but it's just something that I like doing. and I post a lot of pictures of some of my favorite bands that I've taken pictures of over the years. No big, bands, like Dead Guy. I have a lot of pictures of Dead Guy, who nobody out there has probably ever heard of on this channel. But hardcore punk bands, pretty much, shows that you go to and there's less than, 100 people. That's the perfect show for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I was one too many, I'm afraid, because I have some kind of tinnitus on my ear, constant beep, which is,
tinnitus, call it. Tinnitus, you get that, like,
tinnitus. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Tinnitus in German.
Yeah.
Tinnitus. Exactly.
I don't have that, but I've definitely lost hearing, most likely from I mowed lawns, and I was a landscaper for 8 years, and mowing lawns and those giant lawnmowers can take a toll on your hearing. And I would put the earphones, the ones that go in your ear, on full blast all day. So
yeah, not a good idea, but at least we know why we're half. At least we know why we are half deaf. Exactly. But check his Instagram account. This man has books and books beyond your wildest beliefs, and I really was impressed by your punk photos. You sent me a few of them. And they're really interesting. And even though I haven't ever heard about Dead Guy, but about a lot of other punk bands. And that's the beauty of punk bands, that you don't have these stars, this few stars, but a zillion of different bands who just enjoyed to make noise and put it out.
Some of them get big. I think I have shot Green Day, I've shot Rancid, but like a band like Hot Water Music, who you've probably never heard of. I mean, I shot them when they were playing to like 50 people. One of my all-time favorite bands, and then they started playing to 3,000 a night. And a band like Turnstile, who is like this huge band, they got their name from Hot Water Music, and they're on their albums and all that kind of stuff. So some of the bands do get big. AFI is another band that I saw when they were very small, and they blew up, and they'll play to 10,000 people sometimes. But my favorite shows of those bands are the ones where there's 100 people in the room, 200 at the most, and people are going crazy. And I've had I've had black eyes from people jumping off the stage, broken flashes on my camera, broken lenses, you name it.
So yeah, thanks, Scott, for being here, and my
pleasure to be on the Great Earl Grey channel.
I'm really glad that I could integrate you into the Earl-verse and the Earl experience. And however, goodbye. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.